Hey, welcome back to another Haven't Read It video. We got 6 stories from Malicious Compliance today. The first one has an update, so let's jump into that. Wait for feedback? Ongoing. Hi y'all. Thought I'd post this here while I am being maliciously compliant at my current job. I have been with the company, 10,000 plus employees, for 4 years and switched departments last year due to relocation to another country and changed my contract to be fully remote. I really enjoyed the company and position as well as daily tasks and was challenged in many ways and learned a fair bit. But it wasn't a position with contractual remote possibility, so I decided to change departments and to a fully remote position. The new team was very small with just 4 people, including the manager. When I joined the team, I started by organizing their chaos into a workable structure and roadmap strategy on how we can achieve the completion of the open tasks and requests. My manager at that time was useless, but we got along fine and he let me do my thing. However, there are certain types of requests and changes where I do not have the authority to approve, and it needs to go through my manager to the higher-ups for approval. In all that time, all the requests that I forwarded for approval or just feedback were still open and waiting. No matter how many one-on-one or team meetings we had, they are being pushed further out pending approval. For the first few months, I had already completed all assigned tasks where possible and helped out in other teams when I could. This particular manager was promoted after 3 months of me joining and hired his replacement. The new manager joined us 3 months later and reports to my old manager. At this point, I mainly worked with other teams and helped them. All my tasks are awaiting approval and no new tasks were given. I am somewhat relaxed with new people during the onboarding process and make sure they have time to digest it all properly and understand the background. So again, 3 months later and having learned what type my new manager is, I gave up on explaining the complex environment and what is required to be able to deliver results for me or us as a team. At this point, I have worked in that team for 9 months, onboarded my new manager, and completed everything I could complete and helped my colleagues get on with their open work. Naturally, other teams didn't always need my help, so I was a bit idle for most of my manager's onboarding time. Over and over again, I have stated to my new manager that I have nothing to do unless open tasks are given approval or new ones are assigned to me, and I asked to please escalate if any of it really needs to be done. 2 months ago, my new manager exploded on me during a meeting to stop asking for approval on the open tasks and wait for feedback. I specifically sent a follow-up email to get that in writing and promptly received a response back to wait for feedback or new tasks. Well, that's what I do now. I wait and do nothing besides the weekly team meeting where I have no updates. I also no longer help out in other teams because of what my manager said. If the teams really needed my help, they had to go through my new manager, and any request received was rejected. And I will keep waiting until, hopefully, it will explode. Edit 1. My manager's boss knows all of this from his own time managing the team. I have spoken to the big bosses, CEO and CTO, about it and followed it up twice with an email including everything that is still open, including items he needs to approve himself. So I think they are very well aware of the situation. It just doesn't have priority right now. All evidence is saved in an accessible team space, and I have a personal copy. Both I keep updated when something comes up. Fallout. One team member resigned last month, and the other one is already looking for a new job. Important to know, there is a 20-year age gap between me and the other 2 members of the team. They still need or want more experience. Our new manager is in his early 60s and should retire soon-ish. We had an impromptu team meeting yesterday without the manager where we basically all laughed about the situation, but were sad at the same time that we could not use our skills. Personally, I decided to ride this wave and see where it goes, because let's be honest, who doesn't enjoy being paid without having to work? Too long didn't read. Manager said to wait for feedback before doing any more work and to stop following up. Waiting now for 2+ months with no work and no feedback. Top comment says, just a small suggestion, back up that approval list. Or if you want to be meta petty, print out each request and make a wall of them. OP says, I made a folder in our team space with all the evidence of me chasing work, including all the follow-ups I made in writing and my last feedback meeting, which technically HR should be interested in, but they are not, which states this all in writing. There's a backup of all this on my personal device, and if anything new pops up, I will add it. And thanks for the suggestion. I'm kind of hoping for a payout package seeing they don't really need me. And a commenter responds to OP saying, color-coded wall display for different jobs, including color variations for previous manager and current one. For extra petty, red strips across projects that are now dead or cost the company money. Second top comment says, I tried to get put on a project a few years back, even got myself invited to weekly team meetings, but nobody would give me anything to do, so I left the meeting on my calendar and stopped attending. Team is so swamped they hired another person. Meanwhile, I do very little most of the year, and yet nobody gives me work. Fine by me. OP asks, how long did that last? And the commenter responds, it's been about 3 years. I'm a subject matter expert and I work on one project, but nobody wants to include me on anything else because they assume I'm busy on my main project. I have a new boss as of last month, and in another 4 months or so, he might be clued in to the fact that I don't have much to do. But in the meantime, I try to make it seem like I'm busy. We're all remote. My main project is managed extremely inefficiently, so that also helps draw it out. Third comment says, might as well get a second job. OP says, I made already a list with options, but what is holding me back are higher taxes and a required approval from my company, as per policies, that I would take on a second job in a non-competitive field. Maybe I could do more research on how other people deal with extra income and the taxes in such situations. Next comment says, me personally, I'd be bagging some updated certifications. Probably. Okay, maybe. Maybe I'd be hiking. This comment says, I work from home Monday to Friday, PS5 and YouTube all day, and in the office Tuesday to Thursday, web surfing while listening to music. In an average week, I do maybe 30 minutes of work. The rest I can do as I please. All for $70K a year. I'm not complaining. Someone responds, I wish I had your job. And the commenter says, it took a long time to get there. I pay my dues at this place over the past 23 years. And a lot of my situation is due to the family who owns the company being completely incompetent and driving the company into the ground. Not many customers equals not much work to do in my role. For all I know, they'll go out of business next year and I'll be out of a job in my late 50s. Time for the update. Update. Still compliant, still waiting for feedback. It has been nearly a year since I shared this post about my experience following instructions a little too precisely and thought I'd write an update on how things are. Too long didn't read at the end. Since then, not much has changed, which is in itself the story. Very little work has been completed over the past year. We continue to have our weekly meetings, though they rarely produced any concrete feedback or approvals. No further tasks were pursued beyond what was written in my job description. I stayed the course, remained meticulously compliant, and waited for guidance. No more proactive ideas, no creative concepts, and barely any initiative beyond the occasional clarifying question, which of course was promptly redirected to my manager and left in limbo. My last remaining colleague adopted a similar approach, albeit with a bit less subtlety. Eventually, he was let go. After his departure, I was handed some of his tasks, but my approach remained the same. Any ambiguity was returned to sender, and any progress was delayed until proper feedback arrived, which, more often than not, never did. A few months later, a new hire joined the team. I observed his onboarding from a safe distance. To say it was chaotic would be generous. There was no structure, no documentation, and very little support. Watching him navigate that mess reminded me just how deeply the dysfunction had taken root. At some point, the process became even more rigid. Any emails to upper management now required prior approval. Even basic updates were subject to scrutiny, which further slowed communication and progress. And now today comes the inevitable next chapter. Management has decided to restructure the department again. My manager was dismissed. No replacement has been named, and no direction has been given. Just myself and the new colleague remain, both unsure of what happens next. For now, I suppose I will continue to do what I now do best. Wait for feedback. Fallout. At this point, it is unclear what the future holds. With no leadership in place, no updated responsibilities, and no clear communication from above, both of us are in a holding pattern. We have not been given new objectives, nor have we been told what to expect. There is a quiet irony in all of this. The culture of waiting for feedback, of needing permission for every small step, has now left the department entirely unable to move. Leadership created the bottleneck, then removed the only person who was technically holding the valve. So here we are. 2 employees, minimal instructions, and absolutely no feedback. Business as usual. Too long didn't read. Continued to follow orders to the letter after being told to wait for feedback. Did exactly that. No extra work, no ideas, no initiative. One colleague got fired. I picked up some of his tasks, but kept the same slow, approval-dependent approach. New hire came in. Onboarding was a mess. Even sending emails to higher-ups required prior approval. Today, management restructured, fired my manager, and left the rest of us with no direction. Still waiting for feedback. Top comment says, the feedback you were waiting for was supposed to come from your manager, the one who was just fired, right? Congratulations on your patience. I imagine your exit plans are by now very polished and you are just waiting for the inevitable news. OP says, that is correct. Have not been idle during that year, and backup plan B and C with A already underway. Overemployment. Next comment says, you, my sibling, need to learn about overemployment. And OP says, first rule of OE, don't share that you are OE, winky face. Next comment says, you're in Spain, huh? This sounds something like a company in Japan would do to shame you into quitting. But in Spain, it's just weird as hell. Next comment says, have you considered asking your current manager 2 levels up about the intentions of your department? How he views your department in 5 years? And how it makes money for the company? OP says, I tried, but the new director, just joined 3 weeks ago himself and really has no concrete plan on how this is moving forward. When I asked some basic questions on the direction we are planning to take, I was met with silence and some fluffy words. I guess he also will be taking his sweet time to come up with something that can help this in any shape or form. This comment says, is your name Melton and do you work for Initech? OP says, I believe you have my stapler. Next story of the day, scheduled breaks must be taken on schedule. My work has very little interaction with others for the most part. Basically, you come in, do your work, and go home, except for a meeting or two during the day. Pretty straightforward. New manager comes in and wants everyone's schedule so she can keep track of the comings and goings. Your breaks and lunch need to be scheduled the same every single day and taken on time, according to her memo. My morning break is at the end of the team's 15-minute huddle. A few days later, the huddle is running long, so I got up and left the room after 15 minutes. She must have thought I was using the restroom, but I was sitting in the break room, which she noticed when she walked through at the end of the huddle. Every single time the huddle ran long, I'd leave after 15 minutes. She finally asked about it, and I replied that my break was scheduled and needed to be taken on time. She said that means within reason and not to walk out of meetings. I asked if she was going to amend her memo. She didn't amend her memo. I didn't change my routine. This continued like a pissing contest for the 6 months she ran the department until she transferred. The next manager turned huddles into team meeting bullet points for the day, and we all went back to normal. Top comment says, I can't tell you how many times a boss asked me why I do something, and my answer is, 4 years ago you sent an email telling us to do it this way. Well played, good person. Someone responds, in IT, I have a favorite variant on that one. You did it wrong. Why on earth did you do it that way? Why on earth did you approve of the change request where I said I was going to do it that way? Change requests are formal documents that describe exactly what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, and why you're going to do it, and how you'll back out if it goes pear-shaped. There are multiple layers of approvals from both technical experts and management. You also occasionally get something like, there was a 10-minute outage, this is unacceptable. And the response would be, then why did you approve of the change where I said the outage would be up to an hour? Someone responds to this comment saying, I hate ServiceNow, but I love it for the CYA it can provide. This person asks, Fallout? And OP says, none. She didn't want to amend her memo, and I wouldn't be late for my breaks because that was her directive. Every single time she mentioned me leaving, I just respond, I'm required to take my break now. Last comment says, Manglement. Manglement never changes. Next story, manager insists we do timesheets after hours. At our work, timesheets have to be filled in every fortnight on a Friday by close of business to be processed first thing Monday morning. Our manager was a really chill woman who would sign off on timesheets Friday morning and then send them to payroll before 5 p.m. She went on leave because her daughter was having a baby, and we got some young dude to temporarily fill in as manager. This guy was a total D-bag. One of the things he did was insist we complete timesheets only after we'd worked our fortnightly hours. This meant we had to work until 5, then get our timesheets signed, and then get them to payroll. Except payroll closes at 5, which meant we couldn't get our timesheets to payroll until Monday morning, and they'd be processed late. So we decided we'd take our time filling in timesheets. A lot of us hang around chatting on a Friday because there's a bar across the road that does cheap drinks 6 to 7 p.m. So we'd leisurely do our timesheets, and D-Bag Manager would have to hang around to sign them all. One week, we didn't give them to him until right before 6 p.m. He was pissed. This lasted about 6 weeks. I guess something got flagged somewhere that our whole department wasn't getting paid on time. D-Bag Manager was quickly identified as the culprit and given the boot. They ended up getting one of my coworkers to take over until our real manager came back. Takama says, surely you added the hour overtime you spent to fill out the timesheet to your timesheet. OP says, oh yes, and he had to approve the overtime as well. Someone says, chef's kiss. Someone else responds, don't call me Shirley. Next comment says, D-Bag did not think this through at all. What did he have to gain by staying back himself? OP says, I guess he thought we'd flake out on our hours if we submitted the timesheet before the fortnight was officially completed. Guy was too proud to admit he was wrong. Last comment says, as an American with horrible labor conditions, it baffles my mind that somebody could just take months off because their daughter had a baby. Story number 5, no home equipment, no problem. So I work for an agency, and ever since I started 8 years ago, I've always had my own computer equipment like keyboards, mice, etc., and no one has questioned it, not even IT. I get moved to a new small shared office, bring in an extra monitor from home so that I have 3 monitors and get to work. I receive a call after they investigate my office saying it's against policy to use home equipment, despite me having done so previously and IT being aware of it. Immediately, I make a list of all the stuff I'm using that the company should then provide for me, like headphones, a docking station, and a monitor for working at home. I unplug my monitors, mousepad, keyboard, and mouse, plug back in the company's hardware, and slow down my work output drastically. I then take the monitor they gave me and plug it in to replace the monitors I had to take down, and look at them with a shit-eating grin when management came to check if I complied. Well, you get what you wish for, and now since my work output has dropped, they're forced to rebalance the workload. Takama says, I'm going to guess a new mangler got hired or promoted/transferred and feels the need to mark their territory. Rather like when you take a dog out for a walk in the neighborhood. Someone responds, move to the share office. Coworker did the complaining, most likely. Next comment says, when I got 2 monitors, I feel like I was 40% more productive. Someone responds, I think I read a study that basically any office job is more productive with a second monitor. Obviously, some are more impactful than others, but basically all jobs studied had some uplift with a second monitor. Someone asks OP, you unplugged your mousepad? OP says, it's a RGB mousepad with a wireless charger on it. Someone else asks, we're going to have to let you go. Seems your productivity has dropped by 40%, and we're going to fill the position with someone who can handle the workload. OP says, haha, we're unionized, and I still get stuff done in a time frame. Someone asks, one individual or did the company get dumber in 8 years? OP says, I suspect someone got jealous and mentioned something to management because my office is behind a locked door. Either way, I'm also going out on FMLA leave next month, and I might just extend it so that they have to redistribute all my work and look for a transfer to a different department in that time. Last story of the day, the time my grandfather-in-law shut down a steel mill and got overtime rules changed. Story takes place in the 60s. Grandfather-in-law was a World War II vet, was a prisoner of war in Italy, got out of the POW camp and rejoined his unit, then continued the war, so a verified badass. Worked the railroad at a steel mill, just locally moving cars and setting up the train, moving stuff from one plant to the other, that kind of thing. The mill was on either side of a river with a rail bridge connecting them, and the main rails ran right through both sections of the mill. So when he came through with a lot of cars, it would temporarily close the roads in the mill. He would get a little overtime quite often just by the nature of the job. A couple hours or so per week. When it's shift change time but you're driving a train, you need to finish up before you can run the engine back to let your relief take over. So of course, the mill decided to make a no overtime, no exceptions rule. It took him a couple weeks to get it timed just right. At 3 p.m., his shift was over. He parked the engine right by the time clock, clocked out, and went home. He said there were almost 2 miles of cars hooked to the engine. Went through the section of mill he was at, across the river, and into the other section of the mill. All the track was owned by the mill, so it didn't affect the actual railroad, just the mill. The mill bosses wanted to punish him. I forget the details, but the union shut that right down. Nothing happened, and the rules changed the next day. Takama says, USW guy here. Your guy's a champ. OP says, thanks for visiting. My whole family and my wife's whole family were either steelworkers union or railroad union. I'm a union pipe fitter now. Next comment says, Grandpa sounds like a guy who would have worn a red bandana at Blair Mountain. Respect. OP says, probably would have. Someone comments, see, this could never happen today because there wouldn't be a union today. This is why unions are so important. OP says, I'm at the same mill right now as a union member. The union is still here. Did he work for a company in Reading, Pennsylvania? No, farther west. I'm sure he's not the only one that pulled a stunt like this, though. Let me guess. Youngstown, Ohio, sheet and tube. South, Steubenville, Ohio. Fallensby, West Virginia. Not too far off the mark. Last comment says, I've read this story before on Reddit. I don't believe it's yours. You're karma farming. Believe what you want. Doesn't matter a hill of beans to me. Sorry you're so cynical. I'm not. I've just read this exact same story before. Millions of people are alive right now. Millions of people have been alive in the US in the past, previous generations. Of course, there'll be similar fucking stories. But that's all we have today. Thanks for listening. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.